Hi. So today is our podcast recording with Chris Eisenstadt from the BookTrust. He is the new director. Chris actually used to work for us until quite
That's right.
recently, so that this is quite nice. It's like a wee catch up.
It's a homecoming.
You might have actually heard us chat to Chris before about our last video games podcast as well. So possibly a familiar voice for all our listeners. But today we're going to be discussing the benefits of reading. So, Chris, why would you say reading is so essential for children?
Yeah. Book Trust is obviously an organization aimed primarily at helping children develop, first of all, a shared reading habit, which is where their parents read to them or their guardians or whoever. And then later on, developing as they get older, an independent reading habit. And the reason that we care about this sort of thing is really the benefits of reading are difficult to overstate. And I don't say that lightly. Children that are read to have better emotional regulation. They have better mental health outcomes. They obviously have, well-established better academic outcomes. And then there's kind of intangible benefits as well, because it opens up like lots of different worlds for them to explore, exposes them to new ideas. It helps them with their problem solving. It helps them make sense of what's going on in their lives, and also to kind of like process, things that happen to them. Reading really is, magical for brain development and for children's development. And it's also helpful, thinking about it from a parenting perspective, build a warm and loving relationship between the parent and the child as well. So, I think we can all probably remember talking to one of our parents about a book that we both read and kind of having that lovely shared experience of talking about, well, do you remember when, in chapter 7, this happened and that kind of thing? It's very obvious. And we all have books that we know and we remember from being young children that kind of warm, fuzzy feelings of like, my mom used to read this to me when I was a baby and that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's really a great thing to do in general, and something that we're very supportive of, obviously at BookTrust.
Yeah, well, just before I came on to chat to you, I spent a little bit of time doing some research myself, and the research suggests that even 10 minutes of reading can have an impact. So, like, I think like for parents, well, I guess at the minute because we're in the pandemic, and there still is quite a few children that are at home, it can be really, really difficult for parents to kind of manage their time. And sometimes it
Certainly.
almost feels like even just that one storybook can be too much. But, from what the research is suggesting, it's always worth it to take that time out. So
Definitely.
that's useful for parents to know as well. What age
Yeah.
should you start reading with your child then?
So I mean, realistically, the answer to this question is as early as you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Look, it's difficult and time is precious, as you say, especially during the pandemic, can be quite
Yeah.
overwhelming emotionally, but it's literally almost never too early to start. Like, for example, if you're pregnant, uh,
Hmm.
your baby inside you can hear sounds as early as 18 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and regularly talking to your bump will actually help them recognize your voice and be comforted to listening to you. So
Okay.
I'm a pretty new father myself. My son is just under 9 months old, and you can definitely tell that our voices, even from the early stages, especially the mother's voice, because obviously the child in the womb will experience a mother's voice differently than other sounds because,
Uh-huh.
just because of physically where it is.
Yeah.
The impact of that is really fantastic in terms of helping them kind of be comforted. And I know that some people find it hard to just kind of ramble and talk. I know my wife, one of the things that she, and she'll kill me for saying this, but the truth is, she says, I can talk nonsense to my son all day, right? Like just about nothing, right? Whenever it's just her and my son, sometimes she feels it a bit, she can kind of feel a little awkward about just like talking at him.
Yeah.
And reading is a great way of exposing your child to language and to your voice and to
Yes.
vocabulary if maybe you don't find it super easy to just kind of ramble. And also there's obvious benefits specifically to reading specific stories. So it's never too early. What I will say is I think a lot of parents understandably find it hard at the very early stages when the child is very, very young. Because
Hmm.
if the child's paying attention. They're not sure if the child's getting anything out of it. Sometimes children can get a little fussy or unsettled. Just keep trying is what I would say. You don't have to persevere and scream a book while the child is crying over the volume. But the reality is, if it's not working one night, that's okay. Come back to it.
Yes.
This habit that you build is going to be really good for you. It's going to be really good for them. Together, especially for babies and young children, is a fantastic way to bond with your child. It develops physical closeness. It's a shared experience. You spend quality time together. It's also more than just kind of education. It helps you build social skills. It helps you build resilience, which is obviously very important, particularly during challenging times like this. So to answer your question, it really is never too early.
Okay.
If a parent is struggling, that's okay. You don't have to, force it. Just come back to it. Maybe wait a couple of days, try it again. I have found, and I know that this is true for a lot of parents, when you're trying to build a bedtime routine for your child and you're trying to kind of create associations with sleep, a lot of times that's a good time to start reading, because it helps kind of relax the child. It helps to calm them down, put them in a kind of good state to fall asleep. And in fact, children that are read to sleep longer than children that are not read to at night.
Okay.
20, 30 minutes. So,
essential information there for some parents.
Yes, absolutely is. So it's, and there's such a huge range of appropriate books for children that, you can always find something that'll catch their interest eventually.
Yeah, completely. Okay. That's really useful. Really useful information. And kind of on the back of what I was saying before, I kind of said that research suggests that even 10 minutes of reading can have an impact on your child in terms of like positive outcomes. But how much time would you recommend, or the BookTrust recommend, the parents should spend with their child reading per week, or even per day if you prefer to talk about it in that way?
Yeah. So I guess realistically, I could say that there's never too much, right? Like, it's never, as much as you feel like you can read to your child and read with your child, the better, right? There's no negative outcomes associated with reading for a particular time. I think what I would say is do what you can, right? So if you have a child, maybe you have a couple of children, they're different ages, it's very hard to find that time. What you can do is 10, 15 minutes a day, and that's really the max that you can handle at the minute. That's okay. As you said, minutes is enough to make a difference. But if you can find time to kind of sit together and read a book, especially as they get older, and you kind of have a set time when you read, because the other thing that's important about reading is to set an example yourself. Particularly children move to towards an independent reading habit as they're starting to kind of read for themselves for pleasure.
Yeah.
See you reading, whether that's a book or a newspaper or whatever it is that you're personally interested in, it encourages them to kind of copy that behavior.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily put a specific time frame on it, other than, it's the same. I know with you guys at Parenting and I, what you tell parents is to do the best that you can. And
yes, of course. Yeah.
Beat yourself up if you don't achieve like the A grade standard that you find from some website on Google.
Yeah.
Important is, every child is different. Every family is different.
Yeah.
If you're finding time to read to your child on a fairly regular basis, you're probably doing a good job.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I imagine that's very reassuring for parents to hear, because I feel like there's so many demands on parents, on the individuals without children as well, but parents, like, you're kind of trying to juggle your social life, maybe not so much in the minute. That's kind of been taken off us.
Such as it is, yeah.
But a social life, like exercise, to work properly, and to maintain family commitments, and then also raise children, and trying to fit in all of the kind of recommended things to help them grow and to be their best. It can just be so overwhelming. But as you say, you can only do your best, and anything, even small bites of an activity such as reading are all going towards helping you reach your goal of being the best parent that you can be for your kids. And
absolutely.
Whatever you
one of the things I would definitely say is, yes, reading has some excellent benefits, and you definitely should do it from an academic and from an emotional and from a mental health perspective. Definitely. But I think what's really important to kind of establish about reading is at BookTrust, we want children to be reading for pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Reading should never be something that you feel like you just have to do. It's another thing that's being loaded onto your back. Reading is fun. Reading is relaxing. Really, reading is like exciting, and in the same way that you wouldn't necessarily, like reading is this great thing that you should do, and it has all these great benefits. It's something that you what you want is to create a environment that you yourself and your child don't see reading as yet another chore like brushing your teeth and tidying your room and now I have to do the reading. And if you're struggling with that, if you're finding reading to not be something that's easy to fit into your time scale and you're not enjoying it when you're reading the books and it's causing you stress, then maybe you need to read something else. Maybe you need to kind of find something that's more engaging for you or that's more engaging for your children, and just keep playing around with it. Like reading is so flexible in that regard. And so I guess what I would say is yes, reading has these great benefits, and you're doing your child a real favor by reading to them and by encouraging them to develop an independent reading habit. There's no ways around that. But you shouldn't look at it as like
a task or a chore.
Right. It's not medicine that you have to take. It's something that you should be like, my child should be excited about reading.
Yeah.
Awesome that I get to do with them in the same way that, say, someone might look forward to playing football with their kid in the garden, right? Like you wouldn't say, oh, okay, great, I've got to go out and play football now. Or my daughter. You'd be like, let's go out and kick the ball around. That's how you should view reading, is like, let's read together. You want to, and you want to kind of be in that situation if you can, where your child is like, I want to read more. Like, I don't want to go to bed. I want to hear the next chapter and stuff. And you go, okay, well, let's pick this up again tomorrow night or whatever. And if that's not what's happening, that's, it just means that you probably need to kind of have another think about what it is that you're reading with your child.
Yeah.
The right books, right? Because almost every type of reading has benefits associated with it. And if a child is engaged and interested in what you're reading, it doesn't matter how banal or disinteresting you personally find it, right? Because his taste is different. If your child is enjoying it, encourage that, right? Take them when they're open to a library and let them choose whatever they want. And no matter how bizarre you might think their choice is, 7-year-old child wants to read a book about bugs, and you're like, why would you want to read about cockroaches? No problem. Let's get the book about cockroaches. No problem at all. The reality is, reading is this kind of infinite gateway into all kinds of different knowledge.
Yes.
And that's what we should be encouraging, is that kind of desire to explore and to learn more and to kind of engage with parts of the world that we might not otherwise be able to engage with. It's not about, your kid will get enough like mandatory, like educational related reading at school, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Reading for pleasure, reading outside of an academic setting should be about enjoying reading for reading's sake, not something that you're doing in order to improve your educational outcomes or your emotional health outcomes. All that stuff all happens too, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. But that is besides the point, really. You're
I mean, that's realistically why policymakers should care about reading, right? That's why the Department of Education, for example, funds us to do the work that we do. People who are in charge of, educational development and child-related policy should care about reading. They should care because it's got all these great societal outcomes.
Yeah,
but that's just icing on the cake, right? Because what they should be focusing on is that this is something that their child enjoys and that it's good for them, and just encourage them to do that. And don't beat yourself up because your best friend's son has read 7 books over the last month and your daughter's only read 2 or whatever. Like, reading is reading, right? And
absolutely,
it's different. And if your child is reading for fun, that's kind of mission accomplished, right? Like that's
you're doing pretty good by this stage anyway.
Absolutely. And obviously parents are so hard on themselves and they're so focused on am I giving my child the best start? Am I doing the best I can for them? And the reality is, you guys at Parenting and I know that most parents are doing the best they can. And if you need help, that's what organizations like Parenting and I and BookTrust are here for, is to help, with that sort of information.
Yeah, completely. were your children's interests actually like where they find their interests from?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
like that is a journey in itself, and they kind of discover things about themselves, and you discover things about themselves that you
Exactly.
didn't know were there, because they're given the opportunity to explore outside of their normal form or terms of reference, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And you know, like there really is no cheaper way
No.
to explore outside
Books
of.
at the library are literally free. So
Yeah, exactly,
it's
which is amazing. And like, you know, Libraries NI are another wonderful organization, and they do
absolutely,
really
yeah.
brilliant stuff as well. So take advantage if you can, and like, you know, let your kids find out what interests them themselves, and you know, champion it. You never
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
Um,
that's the truth, is that, you know, you put it perfectly there, Catherine, is that the one of the amazing things about reading is that you learn, your child helps to learn, it helps your child to learn who they are.
yeah,
It helps you to discover elements of their personality or their experiences that you might not otherwise have gotten an opportunity to know. And then one of the other nice things is, you know, for both people who come from some sort of minority group and those who don't, it gives you an opportunity to experience the thoughts and the experiences and the lives of people who are very different from you. So,
yeah,
for example, if you are a member of an ethnic minority, you
mhm,
might not feel overly represented in mainstream media, because let's be honest here, most people in mainstream media look like you and me, right?
yes,
Maybe a little bit younger, a little bit older, but broadly speaking, kind of white, cisgender, you know.
yeah,
But if you're an ethnic minority person, an ethnic minority, you know, if you read books, you all quite often be able to find somebody who's written a book from a perspective that's familiar to you. You know,
yeah,
that maybe from a an ethnic minority background or a religious minority background, or some other kind of minority background, and you'll be able to find yourself in those books.
hmm,
One obvious benefit, and that, you know, something that we are very supportive of at BookTrust NI. But on the other hand, if you're from a minority like myself, sorry, majority, sorry, like myself,
hmm,
then, you know, it gives me an opportunity to kind of experience and empathize with people who aren't like me,
yeah,
who have had opportunities and experiences and challenges.
hmm,
And it helps me to kind of, and helps your child to open up to the extremely wide variety of life that
yeah,
exists.
yeah,
And you know, that's a really good social outcome, you
yeah,
know, because it helps to kind of break down barriers between people who are, maybe society kind of insinuates they're quite different, but what you find is a lot of human experience is very similar.
hmm,
So it really is a magical thing, the capacity to explore the world through books.
yeah, absolutely. Um, what tips would you have then for parents who kind of struggle to get their children into reading?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on partially age, so that's why it's important to kind of like start early if you feel that you can,
Yeah, yeah,
because the earlier that you kind of plant this seed of reading, the easier it is to kind of care for it.
hmm,
It's very important, as I said before, to set an example and be a role model for your child. If your child sees you reading, particularly when they're younger, they're
hmm,
likely to want to read as well. It doesn't have to be a big, massive novel. Nobody's expecting you to necessarily sit there and read Dostoevsky. You know, short story. It can be a newspaper. It can be anything that grabs your interest. But just the physical act of seeing you reading
hmm,
is helpful for that.
hmm,
Before, you know, let them choose. You know, we're all more likely to do something that we've chosen for ourselves than we are um, when we're forced to do something. As I said before, school will give them the opportunity to read the classics. If they're not interested in reading the classics before their time comes, don't try to force them. Anything they're interested in, you know, encourage that. And then in terms of the physical act of reading, particularly when they're younger, you know, make it cozy. Once you've decided on a book, snuggle up together, get as comfy as you can. If your child's old enough, you can sit together and they can hold the book and turn the pages for themselves.
yeah,
Even babies, you know, will find being close to you, hearing your voice is relaxing.
hmm,
And also, older children will love just having kind of a special one-to-one time where they can cuddle and unwind. I mean, that's certainly, you know, when you've got like a young primary school age child or whatever,
hmm,
sometimes it's hard to get one-to-one time with them because you're working and they're at school. And when they get home, it's this big rush of get them dinner and get their homework done. All taking that one-to-one time to just read a little bit together.
hmm,
Good.
hmm,
it's important to say that there's no such thing as like a wrong book, right? The most important thing is that you find a book that gets your child turning pages, whatever the subject matter. And as both you and I have said at this point, 10 minutes a day is all you really need to make a difference. So, I guess it goes back to what I was saying to you before in terms of reading is fun. Reading is a leisure or should be a leisure activity.
Yeah.
It's something that your child chooses to do and enjoys. And if that's not already the case, the way to encourage that is to give them the power to kind of choose their own way of getting into it, right? Yeah. It's like, if you think about it like sports, right? Like I was rubbish at rugby and cricket at school. Like I did not enjoy rugby and cricket at all. And if I had only ever done rugby and cricket, then I probably would never do any sport at all. Because right? And if that's what the only sports available to me, then sport would just not be part of my life. End of story. Yes. But because I got to play things like basketball and I got to do some martial arts and stuff like that as well, and swimming, which are sports that I enjoyed more, I realized, okay, I can enjoy sport. Sport can be a part of my life. And it doesn't have to be this part that I find dull or boring or disinteresting. Mm-hmm. You really can think of books the same way. If you try to read the books that you think are like right for your child, whether those are kind of classic literature books or staples of children's literature or whatever it is, and you find that your child's not engaging, mm-hmm. It's not because they don't not necessarily probably because they don't like reading or because reading's not for them. It's just because those particular books don't reach, don't kind of like catch their interest. So just explore and encourage them. And, in the same way that if you want to get your child, like I said, into sport, you would let them try lots of different types of sports. Let them try lots of different types of books, no matter how unusual or strange. If your child really wants the, political atlas or geographic atlas or whatever, and that's what they really want to read, well, I mean, sure, And if they want to read, if you've a young boy and he really wants to read like Tracy Beaker, then let him read Tracy Beaker. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, the reality is, when a child's chosen something and that means they are interested in it. If you encourage that interest, that will help them to kind of see reading as a fun thing, mm-hmm. not like a school related thing, right? Like if they see reading as basically more homework, it's going to be hard to encourage them to do it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Something that they can do, like, you can only read when you've done your homework. Okay, well then I better do my homework so I can start reading. Yeah. That's the kind of, I guess, viewpoint we want to find on reading.
Yes, of course. Just let your children kind of do what works for them and pick what works for them, and you'll probably go quite far with them, I guess, in that regard.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's important to recognize that when you come from a family where reading was expected and standardized, but the reality is some families through no real fault or critique of their own, reading just wasn't a part of the day-to-day, right? Mm-hmm. That just wasn't something that maybe their parents did or their grandparents did, and I think for those, it's particularly important for those families to recognize that reading can be accessible.
Oh yeah.
It can be something that you can do as a family, even if maybe you, for example, have some doubts about your own literacy. Mm-hmm. You maybe have you didn't read a lot growing up and you're not really sure how to get your children into it, and you want them to read more, but you don't really know how to do it. The best way is to just let your child pick a book and read with them. And best. Yeah. And really, the benefit is going to be that they see you as a parent encouraging them to read. Yeah. They're not going to care about your reading ability. They're not going to care about whether or not you read this book as a kid or not. Like, that's all nice, obviously, to have. But, I think for a lot of people for whom reading is not I think for a lot of people where reading just isn't maybe like the done thing.
Yeah.
Leisure activities. There's a lot of parents who maybe don't know they don't have a reading habit themselves. They don't know how to instill it in their children.
Yeah.
It's just, easy, simple steps, reading a little bit to them at night, reading together, letting them pick their books, and just going with it and not putting too much pressure on yourself to be, reading this book or that book or this book. I mean, sometimes I worry a little bit about, and I understand where these programs come from, but where it's like, oh, my child's read this many books and this many words and he's reading at this level. And that's all really fantastic. And that's really, I'm not criticizing those projects at all. But what I wonder sometimes is the parents whose children maybe aren't in the top level of their class in terms of reading.
Yeah.
What I want for those families to hear is that doesn't mean that the amount of reading that you're doing as a family is somehow inferior to
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah,
families.
completely. Yeah.
And to just do, again, what I said before, what you can.
Mhm.
And, as a parent, you want what's best for your child, and, just keep encouraging them. And eventually, and not every child's going to be like, reading at a a fifth form level in P4.
Yeah, of course not.
That's not important. What's important is that they enjoy reading, and that reading is a fun and exciting experience for them. And you don't need to be the best reader in the class to get something out of reading.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
It's not a competition. It's not about saying, I'm the best, I'm the quickest reader, I'm the best reader, I have the biggest vocabulary. None of that's important. What's important is that you, as a child, have a love for reading, you have an interest in reading, and that love and interest is supported by your parents.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's wonderful. Like it's wonderful if you do happen to have one of these, these kids who are complete superstars when it comes to reading, and that's just something that they take to, like, a duck to water. That's brilliant. But you're so right. That isn't going to be the norm for everyone, and it isn't going to be the norm for every parent to read all the time either. Sometimes it's maybe just not even practical, and that you just.
Well, that's it, exactly. I think I've never met somebody who says, "Oh, I read enough." I've never met somebody who says, "Oh, I read enough," right?
Yeah.
they say, "Oh, I wish I had more time. I wish I made more time for reading. I wish I used to read more." And I mean, that's incredibly common. You never hear somebody says, "No, I get enough reading in. I'm done." Like, no, that's not how this works, right? So it's not a competition. It's not like, the Olympics here. Like, if you're reading one book, and that book is the book that really gets you, and you really get something out of that book.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And that should be celebrated. You don't need to waste time because parents do that to themselves, don't they? They really heavily and almost always negatively compare themselves to other parents. Hey, so this boy is already doing this, and my child's only doing that, or they're all so perfect and I'm really struggling. And the reality is that's just not the case for anything.
Yeah, of course.
And just focus on what's right for your family. Don't worry about what's going on in other people's families, right? That's not the key here, is to kind of be so hard on yourself. Just what you can, and encourage them to read, encourage their interests, and you'll see a dividend from it. You will, no matter how much they read. It's better than if they don't read.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you have advice to help parents improve their children's reading ability then, kind of on the back of that?
So, I mean, I think that part of that's definitely educational. And if they're struggling with reading, I think probably the best first stop is their school and their teachers. And obviously, the teacher can kind of give you some advice there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I keep coming back to it. Reality is the best way to get better at reading is to read. And I think what you do there is you find a book that they're interested in, and children will make the effort to read a book that they're interested in.
Yeah, if they like the subject, then they'll kind of find their way there themselves without having to do a lot of the running and chasing behind them.
Of course, and in those circumstances, it would probably be worthwhile and good to share that reading habit. Whether that means you read the same book at the same time, or you read to them. Mm-hmm. If you, again, just make reading something that it's like, again, if I go back to the metaphor or the comparison with sport, nobody's brilliant at sport the second they try it.
Yeah.
If you have, some people just need a little more practice, and if you enjoy the activity, practice will be easier for you, right? Even if the progress is slow.
Yeah.
Because maybe you just find that part difficult, you'll be more motivated to keep trying and to keep overcoming those difficulties if you're enjoying what you're doing. A lot of the time when a child is maybe not doing so great at reading at school, it might well be that they're reading books they're just not interested in. And it's hard to motivate themselves to be interested in that particular genre of book, which is probably being included in the curriculum for academic reasons, rather than, it's not like they go to these, they don't let kids choose what book is going to be what is going to be on their GCSE test or whatever for obvious reasons.
Absolutely.
So the reality is, if your child is struggling at school with reading, there's a wide variety of ways that can be remedied. And as I say, the first step is to talk to their teachers.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what parents can do, it's to encourage them to read something that they are interested in, and to not get too hung up on, again, where they are academically compared to their children, because the reality is every child develops differently.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're supportive, and as long as you don't let them associate being, struggling with reading at school with all reading being something that's hard and unenjoyable.
Yeah, completely.
Not have that link, right? Of like, everybody struggles with, everybody can name a book they had to read at school that they didn't, right? I don't know if I'm allowed to say, I don't know if I'm allowed to say which book at school I really didn't enjoy. It was a collection of poetry more than a book. But the reality is, everybody remembers the first time they read Shakespeare and they went, "What is going on? I don't understand any of this."
Yeah.
Very few people immediately take to every academic book that they're offered at school, right? That's just the reality. And how you get around that is you encourage them to read for fun. And
yes, there is a world outside in books. There is a world outside of what you're given in your English literature classes, and not, to be fair, like, there are plenty of really, really enjoyable texts, but they don't necessarily just suit everybody's taste. And
and that's the reality, is that same as movies, right? Like the biggest blockbusters on earth, you could easily find on the street, dozens of people who hate that movie, even though the most popular movie of all time. In theory, you could it wouldn't be hard to find people who think it's rubbish.
Yes,
it's similar with books, that even the supposedly great literature texts, the books that everybody say are, like fundamental to the understanding of the foundation of our society or whatever. A lot of people just think they're boring or that doesn't mean that books or reading is boring or enjoyable. It just means that particular book.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, again,
if you make that distinction for your children, if your children can understand that is a distinction, then you're doing well, definitely.
That's exactly it. If they're saying to you, "Look, I don't like reading, and I find it hard, and it's boring, and I'm struggling, and I don't want to do it anymore," don't say to them, "Oh yeah, reading's hard." Say to them, "Okay, well, look, you don't like that book, you don't enjoy that book. Unfortunately, you have to do it because of school. Like, so do what you can. But let's go to the library this weekend, or let's go to the bookstore, or let's have a look on a website or whatever, and we'll read a book about someone you like. What is it that you like? What would you like to learn more about? What would you like to hear more about? What kind of story do you want to hear?" And every child will have some sort of interest that they can indulge, right? That's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what it is your child is interested in. There's almost certainly a book that's age appropriate for them about that topic. But, I remember growing up reading the Horrible Histories books, which were,
oh my god, I love them.
Right, exactly. And that kind of made, they made a really kind of stuffy academic subject of ancient Roman history or whatever accessible to children, right? Yes. And it's true of almost every topic, that whether it's science or whether it's history or whether it's whatever, the reality is you can find a book that makes that accessible to your child, right? Yeah. And if you're struggling, we on the website, we have recommendations based on age groups of books that are good. You can always ask your librarian. They are a hugely underutilized resource. Mm-hmm. You can ask teachers for advice. You can ask other parents. There's always something that there's always some sort of resource that you can access to explore that. But the best thing is to just listen to your children and let them tell you what it is. The internet's a fantastic thing, right? Because your child can say, "I'm interested in this," and you just Google that thing, book, kids. You'll find something out there. Now, obviously, look, you need to be discerning, and it's important to kind of note that, like, not every single book is suitable for every single age group, right? Yes. There are some books that have mature content or whatever, and it's important as a parent, as always, as it would be with TV or movies or video games or whatever other kind of media they're indulging in, to just be cursory aware of what's in the book. But if it's a child's book, or if it's a book that's aimed at children, it's likely to be appropriate for them.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, I don't imagine your children are clamoring to read Norwegian Wood by Murakami or whatever. I mean, if they are, I guess that's, you know, that's an issue for your family to kind of explore. But the reality is most of the books that children want to read are appropriate for their age.
Our children's books for
Well,
the
they're appropriate for their age group. You know, that's the reality. So, and then obviously every family will determine what is appropriate for their family and what isn't. You know, some families have different views and morals and standpoints on certain issues, and that's perfectly fine. But there'll be something that suits every child. Is what I'm trying to say. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, thanks so much. I think you've given us our listeners a huge amount to think about, and all in a really lovely and positive manner. That was really nice. It's always really nice to speak to someone who is with another organization who kind of is standing on a lot of the same, like, the points that we have, and that, like, you're doing your best.
Yes.
You know, parents are doing their best, and you know, like, the parents listening to this, I'm sure if you are, you know, so interested in the topic of your children reading, that you're probably already, even by listening, you're already doing a pretty impressive job, because you care about, you know, what happens in terms of your children's reading. So just take small steps, and you know, you'll find, I think, with many kids, even if they're maybe not properly living for their English literature classes or whatever it is that is maybe kind of put them off, if you give them a bit more choice and stuff, then they'll kind of get there and they'll start to enjoy it more. And maybe you will as well. Maybe you've as a parent haven't always been a big reader, but as you kind of explore this with your child, you'll also get to a point and be like, actually, you know, I could do more of this myself. So yeah, great to speak to you, Chris.
Thank you very much for having me on.
We might have you on for another episode, you never know. But for the moment, we'll say goodbye.
Okay, well, thank you very much.